This is a final crunch for the T800 build. At the start of this video, there's only a couple of weeks left before the conference starts, and obviously this is a perfect time for things to go wrong, including broken parts and me getting really ill just before I needed to go in. So let's get into how we actually managed to pull this off. So we're going to start with the leg piece. As you can see here, I've got it in place. It's not currently glued. Just going to hot glue all these pieces in place, and that gives us the first part of the leg. So this is now glued together, and already I've learnt my first lesson, which is put the pipes into the shin first, not into the foot. And the reason why is because if you look under here, I've had to basically use a stick to push the hot glue in because you can't get all four of these into the hole quickly enough before the glue dries. So putting these in with the shin side first was the correct thing to do. However, they have an angle on the bottom. I got the angle backwards, tried to pull it out, and ended up snapping one of the rods. So hot glue is easier to get out, but it still can snap your print. Now when it comes to putting the knee joints together, there is a correct and incorrect side with these, because you can see it has the hip joint at the top, knee joint at the bottom. So make sure the hip joint is facing inward when you look at the toes, because you don't want to get this backwards or you'll have a very odd looking Terminator. So now added this piston to the top. There was some problems. This should have been really simple, but it wasn't. So let's talk about why. Now, this is what the piston looks like when it's obviously not attached. One important thing which you may not be able to tell is it has this weird notch in here. Now, I thought this might be support at first, like just some leftover scarring, but nope. This is by design. Now we look at instruction number 15. You can see the idea was that a little piece of filament will go in there. Problem is that this has been scaled up by 400%. We can't just stick filament in there. We have to put something else in. So my idea was simply buy a metal rod around about, I think it's 8mm, might be 6mm wide, and then use that. However, because of all of the wonderful tolerances on 3D printing, that's probably not going to fit. So it was a bit too tight. So I went back to the idea of scratch building and just made something up. So we've got these nails right here. Now what's quite cool about these ones specifically is they've got a very large flat head on them. What that means is that the head will sit flush on here. As you can see, I've tried hitting it in, but I think I'm just going to have to put a little bit of hot glue on there. Now this is on the inside of the leg, importantly, because what I'm going to do for the outside of the leg is use one of these Chicago bolts. Now these normally come in a pair and look like this, so they can be used to look like rivets, and a lot of cosplayers use them, but these are around about the right size. It's going to take a little bit of forcing to get this in, maybe a bit of heat on the other side. So you can see once that does go in, that will look pretty cool, I think. So yeah, right now it's not quite going to fit. I am going to force the thread before I finish painting it, because I don't want to split it when it's painted. That will upset me a lot. But if I split it now, I'll still be upset, but at least I can fix it. So there you go. There's that screw all the way in. This is purely cosmetic. It's not actually holding anything in place. We're going to use the nail on the other side. I'm going to stick a little bit of hot glue on that. Now the trick is I'm not going to put any glue in the middle on the joint, because this is supposed to be a little bit articulating, and because we haven't got the hip together yet, I don't want to glue it in place and have to snap it later. This is a hip section. This is the front of the hip. I've painted it a little bit, but only just to give it a basic silver coating, because I got sick of looking at it in yellow. But the problem we're having with this one is, you see these ball joints on the side? There was one on each side. There's a bit missing. So this is supposed to have a cog in here, which is one of these. Now this is actually supposed to go between that ball joint and the leg. The only problem is that when these are in, they do not want to come back out again because of the way that they're designed. So they're designed to snap in and then never come out again. So I'm currently using a Dremel, you can see down here, to cut these out because I messed up. So I'm reprinting these, and it's just another thing to add to the comedy of errors, which is so far going along with this build. This foot section is another one which has been a genuine pain. I've had to re-glue this several times because it keeps falling out, and that honestly looks like it might come out again. It is only hot glue at this point, so it's not terrible, but it is really annoying. All right, we have some progress. We got this thing stood up under its own weight. Some minor issues again, because when is it not minor issues, but these cogs here, the bits which I removed the entire hip section to make sure that they were in place, don't actually bite onto the thread. You can see this one's really bad. Well, yes, we have progress. So I'm just going to get these pistons done. I've reprinted them, which are going to go in the front right here and at the back in the same place, because they snapped previously. So we've got these solid infill, as I said earlier. So we are coming to the end of the day, and this arm piece right here, this has genuinely taken a few hours. And the reason being is because of all of these connections where you can see the metal pipe. I've had to get the Dremel on each and every one of these to make the holes big enough to actually fit this metal pipe into it. So that bit's finally done for one of the arms. Now the other thing that we have done is we've got these reprinted for the hip joint. So these actually snapped the first time. So what I've done is I've printed the layer lines this way. I went and reprinted them so that it gives us a lot more strength when we're trying to push these and manipulate these around, so they won't simply snap right here, which is where they snapped before. I did that for both sides. As I say, brand new print, so they're not particularly well sanded. But at this point, we're getting to the point where we've only got 10 days, I think, until this needs to be finished. And I think the painting is going to be a huge part of that. So next time we're in here, we're going to finish off doing these shoulder joints and then possibly looking at putting the torso on. So we've got the bulk of the bottom half of the Terminator done. I've sprayed it all with a coating of silver, basically. This is Rust-Oleum Chrome we've got all over this. And the reason for that is I can now go over the top with the shiny chrome on all of the important bits and leave any hidden bits just with the more of a matte silver look. And the next part we're moving on to is the body, which we have right here. Still needs to have a little bit more paint put on that top section there, which connects to the neck. As you can see, we're going to start putting this together. We have all of these wonderful connection points where lots of little things are going to get plugged in, and I just started on the back. Got one of the plates on. I'm just going to put the other plate on next and then continue. We still have this line right here, and what this is from is when I had to split this into multiple parts to print it, and been trying to fill it and clean it up, but it got to a point where I was like, you know what, it's on the back, that's probably not going to be seen, so it's more important to clear up the front. The front does still have a little bit of staining just here where the seams are, but I'm okay with that. And a little bit of damage here. This is because it keeps falling over because it has a circular base. So I'm going to get this put together, and then I can put this on top of the skeleton, see how that works. So I'm currently constructing the body piece, and these connectors down here were a genuine pain in the backside, to the point where we actually had the plastic split, and I was panicking. I thought this is going to be a whole new reprint, but I think I've just managed to stick some glue over the top of it, and we're going to see how that works. So if you're doing this, when you're printing these sections out which connect in any of these ball joints, you want to be printing them 1 or 2% smaller if you're doing it up to 400%, because they just do not want to fit into these gaps, and I've had to stand here with a sanding tool trying to get these in. I've started with some of these connectors. None of these are glued in right now, but we're just putting these in place, dry fitting everything, making sure that they go in the right place. So we've gotten most of the body done at this point. Because of this scale, this normally had filament. You can see there are some holes inside there. The filament would have come out there and would have wrapped around a lot of the parts. So we're going to have to improvise and figure out something to replace those bits with. And the last thing we're going to need to do before we put the head on is put the arms in these holes right here. There's a little bit of eggshelling on the paint up here, which I'm going to have to deal with before putting the final T coat over the top. Also, this thing is now covered in dust again, so it's going to need to be cleaned. And yeah, that's kind of important before you go ahead and do the final coat of paint. I may have forgotten to do it on some of the leg parts, so it's not going to be perfect, but at this point I just want to kind of get it done. The other thing I have hesitated with is, you can see down here, this part of the body does need one of the flat panel, which is this one right here. So this one looked odd when I put it in, and I didn't like the way it sat, because it can either sit at that kind of an angle where it's really sticking out, or that kind of an angle which I think is correct. I also need to make sure I've got it the right way around, because it has this recess. It doesn't fit into anything if it goes this way around, so it makes sense it goes that way around, and then it will look like that. But before I go and stick a load of CA glue on there to hold it in place, I want to make sure I've got that right. We are very nearly done with this now. So this thing, by the way, is huge. It dwarfs me. I haven't put the hands on yet. That's going to be one of the last jobs, because I need to put all the fingers together and make sure they don't break. I've done a little bit of wet sanding just to get rid of some of these scratch marks that we had. I'm going to go around and do a bit more before I do the final paint. So that's probably going to be a full weekend job. Just going over the entire model, because we've got scratches down here from the build. We've got parts in here where there's dust trapped under the paint because some idiot didn't clean it before painting it. This side now, these legs are a genuine pain in the backside. We can still see this connector line here as well, which isn't great. I'm a little bit worried about that, but you know what, it's going to deal with it as it comes. If it breaks, reprint it, repaint it, and replace that bit. None of these bits are in permanently, so the only glue I've used is some wood glue, apart from on this bit here, which I was talking about a minute ago. This has been CA glued in place. If that goes, then yeah, that's going to be a problem that I'm going to have to deal with. For now, it's just going to stay like that. Obviously need to paint the arms, the silver undercoat that I've been doing. So yeah, I'm really happy with how this is looking so far. Let me back up a little bit, get a better view of that. But this is how it looks. Only leaning back against my tent because this thing is crazy heavy. Like I say, all I need to do now, put the hands on, put the head on, and that is pretty much done. Well, apart from the painting, but you know, I'm sure that won't take long. So this has basically taken me the whole week because of reprints and because of issues that I've hit. Yeah, allow yourself some time to do this build. So I don't even tell from my voice from the end of that last clip. That is just before I got really ill with, I think it was the flu. I don't actually know. I know it wasn't COVID, did a test. However, that means that I had to paint this thing and finishing assembling it whilst being very, very poorly. I didn't actually record anything. So all I can do now is show you the glory shots and give you some clips from the event. But ultimately, the painting went pretty easily, to be honest. It just needs a couple of days to cure, so I had to get all of this done. And on the day that I travelled, it was almost cured. The paint was pretty much cured by the time I got there. I just had to put a sign up saying don't touch. So if you enjoyed this build and you want to see more, please hit that subscribe button, and I will see you in the next build, which is hopefully coming soon.